War, corruption and greed has left its mark on humanity. The world has become hostile. Things we take for granted is a scarcity, such as food, shelter or even human interaction itself. Cheeto and Yuri is one of the few remaining, traveling through an empty world with the goal of reaching the highest point of the city, gradually becoming more and more complex by each layer. Searching for a way to cross the crevice that's spanning through the city, they spot a cigarette butt. It becomes clear that they are not alone. Before having the opportunity to investigate, a building collapses right next to them. Through the smoke and the debris, they can spot the shadow of a person, Kanazawa, an older guy who has spent the remainder of his time mapping the city. They are a bit hesitant at first, even drawing their gun, since this is probably the first person they have interacted with since escaping. They eventually open up and let him ride along, since they have the same objective and he can navigate the city with ease. To access the next level, they must take an elevator, which is built on the outside. It's been a while since the elevator was maintained. The elevator malfunctions, which sends Kanazawa's bag containing all of his maps over the edge. In a desperate attempt to save his life work, he throws himself after it, but ultimately fails. Before going separate ways once at the top, he gives them his camera for saving his life, losing both of his belongings the very same day. New level has a lot of stone statues, which neither of them has seen before. Instead of taking notes or sketching them, they start taking photos of it, documenting their travel a bit more efficiently. The further they travel, the more they appear, ultimately leading up to a temple, which previous generations seem to have worshipped as gods. Driving through what looks like the remainder of a forest, their vehicle breaks down, impossible to fix and basically stranded in the middle of nowhere. They spot a plane, a prototype to be exact. The plane belongs to Ishii, a mechanic who has been working on building a real one in hopes of escaping the city. In exchange for repairing their vehicle, they will help her with the plane, providing food and shelter in the meantime. Spending months, possibly even years, working towards a goal you thought would set you free or achieve your dreams. Just for it to fall apart in mere second after launch. Instead of anger and frustration for failure, there is acceptance, falling deeper and deeper to layers that will take years recovering from, assuming there's any food left. The goal was escaping from the city, but the question is, will it even matter in the end, as most of humanity is dead anyway? Back on the road, they arrive at what looks like a giant library in the middle of nowhere. This is the first time they've seen such a thing. Excited for more books and things to explore, they open the drawers only to find random junk items and a radio. Turns out, it's not a library. Instead, it's a graveyard where belongings has been left in memory of the deceased, so they are not forgotten. Just as their camera reminds them of what they have experienced. Searching for food, they stumble upon a factory that once were a fish farm, where they find a huge aquarium with only one fish left in it. Seeing the fish as potential food, they start wondering how they will capture it. Before having the opportunity to do so, they are greeted by a robot, informing them they cannot do that, because it's the robot's purpose to take care of the fish. The robot isn't exactly what we consider alive, but eating the fish and taking away its sole reason to exist isn't moral either. Regardless of consciousness, it cares for the fish as if it were alive. Demolition of the facility has begun in order to save resources by the large machine they saw earlier. Communication between the robots is futile due to the large ones still following all protocols. From wanting to eat the fish and taking away the small robot purpose to sympathizing with it. Using the explosive they picked up earlier from the plane, they blow up the large machine. Despite it not having the ability to communicate, what almost looks like a desperate plea for its life, it has understood that its life has come to an end. Even though most of humanity is dead, there are still some things that function without maintenance. To travel a bit faster, they take an automated train, which seem to have transported workers and other machinery. Nearing the exit, the radio Yuri kept from earlier picks up a signal. It's a song neither of them have ever heard before. Exploring their new surroundings, they find a small white creature which oddly resembles the one from the stone statues. Food and water are already a concern as it is. They decide it's better to leave the creature, however, it doesn't want to be left behind. Somehow, the creature have adapted to the environment and now its bullets and other weaponry. The same signal as before is picked up once again. Now knowing where it comes from, they decide to investigate. This has been a while since they encountered another human. The signal comes from a stranded submarine. Mind you, this is like level 7. The submarine, however, is absolutely packed with food, and for the first time in a while, it also has electricity. When taking a picture to celebrate, Shito accidentally connects the camera with the computers, displaying all the pictures they've taken during the travel. But there's also some other pictures on the camera. Turns out Kanazawa was never alone. He was living a normal life with his family before war broke out. Neither of them probably understand half of what they're seeing, but this is the first time we, the viewers, get an explanation of what happened. The very next day, Shito is woken up by Yuri being eaten by a giant white noodle, taking her weapon and running after them. She hasn't exactly been eaten. The reason was so they could ingest the radio she had, in order for them to communicate, since they lacked the means to speak by themselves. The song they also been hearing all of this time was their transmission signal being picked up by the radio. Their purpose is to clean up unstable matter, such as bombs or other weaponry. With cleaning up, they mean eating. Most of the city has already been cleared of such things, and this is the first humans they have seen across multiple levels. Once their job is done, the city will eventually come to a halt and humanity will cease to exist. Overall, the anime did a very good adapting the manga, aside from some minor interactions they left out, probably due to it not being relevant to the story. This series doesn't follow the usual way of storytelling. Their objective is kind of loose, which is to reach the highest point of the city. It's never really explained why that is, which makes me think it's not the goal of the series that is the actual goal. What do I mean with that? Theoretically speaking, they have all the time in the world to achieve that. The only setback or threat they have is their food supply, which has never run out to the point of starvation. So, it doesn't really matter if it takes them 5 months or 11 years. It's the discoveries along the way and their companionship that is the actual goal of the series. And that's why we don't have an explanation for what's at the top, because it's irrelevant. Anime ends on chapter 31, and with less than 12 chapters left, there's simply too little material for a second season. For the true ending, you have to read the manga, which is exactly what we will cover next. Continuing with their travel, the higher they get, the more unsafe it becomes. Buildings, structures are constantly collapsing from the weather. Just as they make their way through, a couple of steel beams falls on Cheeto's ankle. Not broken, but unable to drive for a few days at least. They encounter more machines, none of which are able to communicate or understand them. They have reached the tower the mushroom people talked about, which will take them to the highest point of the city. Once again, they are greeted by someone, this time an AI, whose job is maintaining the building and be a translator between machines and humans. It's been decades since they've had any human interaction. It takes the time guiding them around the building and talking along the way. For the elevator to start, they have to operate a terminal, which in turn will kill the AI. It has spent decades writing a self-destruct program, but the final authentication requires a human to activate it. Faced with a choice, where there really is no choice, refuse the request and walk back or continue forward. Spending decades alone, it has done everything there is to do. Its main purpose was eradicated decades ago, fulfilling the time waiting for someone to put an end to it all. Before its death, it wants to pray, revealing that it's been the god of failed works, displaying an image which looks exactly like the ones they saw earlier at the temple and the art gallery. For the first time, we get some background information about them, aside from the occasional flashbacks. Society and the world was already in decline, food being rationed, military surveillance. Their grandpa knew exactly what was coming, so he sent them away before things get even worse. Weather is even colder than before. Buildings and structures are in worse condition than ever. There are no longer any buildings to sleep or take cover in. Just to stay warm during the night, they are forced to build an igloo. Knowing the top is near, they take every opportunity they get to investigate the things that are found along the way. And this time, actually finding a library that isn't a graveyard. Their vehicle has reached the end of its life, and this time actually impossible to fix without the right tools and assistance. Spending a few extra days trying to fix it would only drain their food supply even more. Forced to leave it behind, only taking the most important belongings with them. Things they considered a necessity is only an obstacle now. Forced to burn their books just to stay warm during the night and dropping the rifle since it serves no purpose anymore. It's too late to turn around now, with less food than ever before, and without the help of their vehicle, going back is simply not an option. Forced to cling to the hope, as that whatever is at the top will help them and serve them well. At last, they have arrived at the final staircase, separating them from the final level.